Alright, so today we are testing Stalker 2 with the RTX 4080 Super. We've got that paired with a 14700KF CPU, and that again is paired with DDR5 6400 megatransfers per second CL32 memory, 32 gigabytes of it. And I just finished the entry or the intro mission, and here I am with no health and very few bullets, and I'm struggling. Alright, so currently we are at 4K on the Epic preset native resolution. Let me just show you the settings here quickly. So Epic quality, and we can just go down here to performance boost. There we've got DLAA, so native resolution, 100% render resolution scale, no frame generation, and the rest are on Epic as well. And as you probably saw, it's pretty rough going at 4K. So one thing, this my crosshair is green, so I'm assuming these are friendlies, but they're not. They really are not, and for some reason I really can't shoot either. So it's kind of confusing. The game has received very rough reviews so far on well, basically from all the critics. And it's not looking so good, and the reason for that is if you look at the frame rate, this guy had a much bigger gun. What's up with this? Okay. Did he drop his gun somewhere? Yeah. Ah, there we go. Okay, so let me just pick that one up. Now we might have no, we don't. We only have 4 bullets now. 40-ish frames per second here at 4K Epic. Sure, it's on the Epic preset, you might argue. But then again, it is also on a 4080 Super with a 14700KF CPU. Like I was expecting a little bit better performance here, but I mean, so it goes. Right, so the game does look pretty good. I mean, it really does look extremely good. Let me just show you the water effects, etc. Now, the game does not support ray tracing or full ray tracing as far as I'm aware. I know that the developers are working on a ray traced patch. That's what I'd read actually. But reflections look pretty good. I'm not sure if it actually does use Lumen, but there's nothing in the settings that tell you that it does use Lumen or anything. I could do see kind of realistic, accurate reflections. So they're not really screen space only, but so they do seem to be ray traced in some way, so maybe Lumen. And then the water looks pretty good. I think visually the game looks plenty good, but performance wise it's kind of it's very heavy. But you can just look at the foliage here, etc. It really does look pretty good, and it is an Unreal Engine 5 game, so once again the performance is going to be quite heavy. Now, unfortunately, we have to restart the game for each setting change or each preset we change here. So I think I'll be doing it a little bit different here. I'm going to leave it on the Epic preset, and we'll just test the DLSS and that kind of stuff. And then we'll do 1440p as well in the same breath. And then we'll change the presets down and test both resolutions again. So let's try DLSS quality here. So it does say 66% render resolution scale. So let's go ahead and save that. Remember, we were getting around 45 frames per second. Now that has jumped up to around 65 to 70 frames per second. The game feels much better, and I think at 4K this is definitely not the worst. The game still looks plenty good, and we are getting an above 60 frames per second experience here. No frame generation yet, so the input latency is pretty good, and I think at DLSS quality it still looks extremely good. Now, I had to play up until this point because it was the first mission was extremely dark, and you'd not be able to see anything, unfortunately. So 65 frames per second there on average, actually not terrible. So let's see how well DLSS scales here. 65 frames per second on DLSS set to quality. So let's see balanced. I'm actually curious to see where we will run into a CPU bottleneck. I know we're still at 4K output, but game is very heavy on CPUs as well. So 74, let me just refresh the numbers again. As you can see, the lows drop quite quickly, and I don't know, the first mission was definitely much worse than here at night. Maybe that's why, but okay, over here the stuttering, as soon as you start loading in new assets, it does become very, very demanding actually, or very stuttery. So 69 average frames per second there, getting around 70 frames per second here in the specific spot, and our lows are pretty bad, but our GPU power usage is very low actually, sitting at 250 watt. This GPU can utilize up to 320 watt, and some games, especially at 4K, definitely can do that. But over here we're doing 240 watt. I mean, we're using DLSS, so it's not true 4K, but not horrible. We did not gain that much going from DLSS quality to DLSS balanced. So let's see DLSS performance here, and you can see it's 50% render resolution scale, so 1080p internal resolution, and we gained another 10-ish frames per second. But now you can just look at the shadows there. They are very low resolution, so it's like shadows falling on transparent objects. It seems to be very low resolution, and that looks horrible. I saw it previously with using DLSS performance as well. I'm not sure if I should be taking these guys on, considering I don't have any health. Let's just see. The healing is also kind of confusing. You have to hold in Q or press Q depending on what healing action you want to perform. That has caused many a death for me. So, but you can see over here in the heavy foliage area, we're still getting around 70 to 80 frames per second. So not horrible, but very, very heavy. I mean, quality got us to around 60 frames per second as well, but I think if we want to maintain above 60, we'll have to use DLSS performance, right? So let's go back to DLSS quality, and then we'll enable frame generation. Remember, we were getting around 60-ish frames per second here, so it should be enough for DLSS frame generation to not be or to have the biggest impact on input latency, depending on our final frame rate, of course. These guys are obviously following me, right? Let's just reset the numbers again. So getting around 89 frames per second. So pretty much, yep, they're following me. So more than what we got at DLSS performance, but now unfortunately at the cost of slight input latency, maybe some. Okay, I don't think we'll see more artifacts than a DLSS performance actually. Is there dynamic time of day? Because it's starting to get darker. Okay, maybe I should speed up my benchmark run here. Alright, so 80-ish frames per second. Not ideal for frame generation, I'm not going to lie to you. The input latency is definitely noticeable. And I'd personally try and aim for at least 120 frames per second with frame generation enabled, but it's not really possible in this game with this system, right? And this is definitely not a slouch of a system, just saying. Right, so 89 frames per second here, but our lows are pretty bad actually, sitting at 51 and 29 respectively, actually dropped down to 26 there. So not horrible, I mean the frame rate itself is not horrible, but the lows are pretty bad. So let's go ahead. I'm going to actually reload my save just to make sure that the time of day does not really affect our performance here. Actually, yeah, this is okay. We can get here. We should these anomalies are quite annoying as well. Let me just get rid of this. I mean, sorry, we had the frame rate counter up previously, and I forgot to put it back up again. So 90-ish frames per second here. Now let's just drop this down to DLSS balanced, I'd say, and see what kind of frame rate we do get. Are these guys still after me? I don't think so. All right, so 95 to 100 frames per second in the specific spot. So let's drop this down to DLSS balanced. I don't think this should be enough to get us to 120 frames per second, actually. Close enough, right? But you can see every time I reset the numbers, the lows take a dive immediately. It might be a reporting issue, but I don't think so. Now, if we whip the mouse around, frame times do become a little bit more stuttery. And let's just see. So 100 and something frames per second here. So once again, not the biggest boost to our frame rate here. We're going to DLSS balanced. We do have frame generation enabled. I really can't play this game. I do suck. There we go. Alright, so let's search him. I'm going to take his gun. Do I have bullets for his gun this time? If I can find his gun. Alright, never mind. There we go. There we go. You have to really aim properly to pick up any weapons or interact with any objects. So Hoshin dies. Okay.
I wasn't really expecting any help. Come on over.
I say that I saved that guy's life. Wow, I really do struggle with my English lately. All right, so 104 frames per second. Your DLSS balanced with frame generation enabled, and I think it's fine, but over here you can see it does become a little bit more demanding. We are getting 90-ish frames per second, quite a few stutters. Now there is quite a lengthy shadow compilation step. When I say lengthy, maybe 3 minutes it took me. So it's very strange that there is still shader compilation. It might be traversal stutter, right? Unreal Engine 5 games or Unreal Engine games in general do suffer quite a lot from traversal and shader compilation stutter. Right, so 102 frames per second here. Let's see DLSS performance, if that can actually get us 120 frames per second. I doubt it. I really do. Remember, DLSS frame generation does help us quite a bit when we do become CPU bound. And now that we're rendering internally at 1080p, 107, 160. Okay, it's all over the place. You can see the lows definitely take a dive, and the frame rate's still around 100 and something frames per second. Our GPU power is sitting at 240 watts, so pretty low once again for this 4080 Super. RAM usage is quite okay, I think. I mean, we're definitely getting past the stage where 16 gigabyte is enough for AAA open world games, and this is a AAA open world game in Unreal Engine 5, so it's by definition it's extremely heavy already. So let's just see. Inside, still around the same frame rate, right? Maybe it's really not that less demanding inside than outside, depending on where we are inside, obviously. But 108 frames per second here. I think that's going to conclude our 4K testing on the Epic preset. Let's drop this down to 1440p, and then we'll drop down to the high preset and restart the game. Right, so currently we're at 1440p. This is an external capture card. That's why it says 4K 60 Pro, whatever. And these are our just the display settings. I didn't show that earlier, but 1440p Epic preset, and render resolution is set to 100% with DLAA, and no frame generation. It does have FSR 3 frame generation as well. All right, so let's see. I think that's going to be too big. I'll be right back. All right, so 1440p Epic preset, ultra epic preset, and native resolution. Now this is not too terrible, actually. I was not expecting us to hit 60 frames per second or even 70 frames per second here. I'm not interested in trying to evade these guys. Again, my mouse is actually on my other screen, so I'm pretty sure if I'm going to click... Oh, come on. This can't be happening. All right, so there we go. Sorry, it's going all black and stuff, but my mouse is... Now it's on this screen. Okay, no, it's not. It goes to my second monitor, even though it is exclusive full screen. How's that possible? So beware if you do have multiple monitors. You might just see, like now, if I'm going to click, it's going to click out of the game again because it's completely on my other monitor. Oh, it's so stupid. Okay, so let me just get it all the way back there again. I'm going to try and keep it in here, but 60 frames per second. I mean, at 1440p Epic preset is very demanding, as we saw earlier, so I'm not too worried about only getting 60 frames per second here. Right, before we die, let's just go into our settings here, and let's just enable DLSS quality. As mentioned in all my other videos, I'm okay with up to DLSS balanced at 1440p, and then I usually enable frame generation as well. But DLSS performance at 1440p is maybe a little bit too heavy upscaling for me. Where do these guys come from? I obviously don't understand anything about this game. Are those also stalkers? Or like, what are we supposed to be doing in here? I skip all the cutscenes, etc., just to get to a place where I can actually benchmark the game, and then when I'm done with my videos, I actually restart the game and play it from scratch. So that's why most of the time I have no idea what I'm doing in most of these games. So I mean, that's my excuse anyway. So I'm not going to try and fight them, although they do seem to follow me quite aggressively. Like okay, 107 frames per second. Yeah, in the specific spots, our average is sitting at 95 frames per second. Not terrible with DLSS quality at 1440p on the preset, I have to say. Just based on my previous testing, the preset scaling actually is quite nice as well. And based on reviews, there's just enemies all over the place. Like, I don't know. All right, let's just try and get out of here. So based on the reviews that I've seen, the game's performance was much worse. A lot of people complained about a lot of stuttering, etc. Sure, there is definitely a lot of stuttering. It's not perfect, but it's not as bad as I was expecting, to put it like that. Right, so 96 frames per second average. Let's see. I'm going to drop it down to DLSS balanced. I think we're on quality now. So DLSS is balanced. We might become CPU bound now. Once again, I know it's a very graphically demanding game, but you can see our GPU usage is not really pegged at 90. Now climbs up again. Okay, so 98 frames per second. Our GPU usage is sitting at 99% as well. And let's drink some condensed milk or whatever this is. No, that's not condensed milk. That's I actually wanted to press that button. There we go, for stamina. All right, so 99 frames per second. Not that big a boost over DLSS quality, and I don't think. I'm actually not sure whether DLSS balanced is worth it over DLSS quality at 1440p. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to DLSS quality and then enable DLSS frame generation. Yeah, as I said, I'm not going to be testing DLSS performance. So DLSS quality, frame generation enabled, and right, here we go. So this is ideally where I'd like to play this game. I do have a 165 hertz 1440p panel that I daily, and I think this would be okay. Maybe DLSS balanced, maybe make it a little bit more CPU bound so that DLSS frame generation can maybe assist us a little bit more. But 130-ish frames per second is really not horrible. And I think we might have to reload my save again. It's getting dark. I don't want to record in at night because then you guys can't see anything. But you can see there's a lot of stuttering still. So like some areas are fine and some areas are less fine. But 140-ish frames per second with the DLSS set to quality and DLSS frame generation enabled. So let's go ahead and just enable DLSS balanced here. Let's see if we can max out my monitor here. Don't think it'll be possible, and as I said, I'm not really willing to drop down to DLSS performance at 1440p. All right, so let's see, we'll be getting around 130, 140 frames per second, and still around 140 frames per second. On GPU power usage is sitting at 200 watts. Okay, so it's kind of chilling, and frame generation actually helps quite a bit with that as well, especially if you start running into CPU bottlenecks. All right, but you can see we're getting an average of 146 frames per second, perfectly fine. I think this is maybe where I'd be playing this, and I'd be happy. Maybe after a patch or two, we'd see more consistent performance using these settings. And now the window is broken, so we can't see the shadows on here anymore. But before we do run out of time, I think I think let's go back to 4K and we'll drop this down to the high preset and see if we can actually hit 60 frames per second. Right, so here we are at 4K on the high preset native resolution. Let's just give it some time for the stutters to subside maybe a bit. I hope they do. Let's see if we can save our friend again before, without dying. I don't think it's going to be possible. Nope. Unless we get some healing items here. We are probably going to die. Yeah. Okay. Alright, so I mean we managed to get almost 60 frames per second here with these settings. Let's just go back into the game. I think the high pre okay. So it saved my game just before I died, and okay, we'll have to reload another save. All right, so over here, this is actually the more demanding area anyway, getting just above 50 frames per second, so not ideal. It's definitely a big improvement over 30 frames per second, right? But let's not waste too much time here. Let's go to DLSS set to quality quickly and see what kind of gains we do get, and then we'll do frame generation, all that kind of stuff, right? So actually a pretty decent boost to our frame rate here, 72-ish frames per second. This should keep us above 60 frames per second at all times, I do believe. Obviously in this is the only area that I do test in so far. Maybe other areas are less demanding, maybe other areas are more demanding, got no idea. I'll play the game and see how far I get. As I said, it's not the easiest of first-person shooters. It's not forgiving at all. All right, so 70-ish frames per second here. So let's go ahead and enable frame generation. I say frame generation very weird sometimes. If I don't concentrate, I just drag it out. I do apologize about that. I know it can be annoying. Right, so with frame generation enabled, 80 frame. No, there we go. 100 and something frames per second. DLSS quality, I think DLSS balance at 4K is actually also very good looking. It's just that DLSS performance at 4K in this game it just seems to affect shadows and reflections a little bit. It's not ideal. All right, so 100-ish frames per second. I'm just going to do this quick run. I mean, you saw where I was running previously, so I'm not going to do a full benchmark run each time. Let's go ahead and do DLSS balanced here quickly without frame generation. It's this way, and then without frame generation. Although previously, as I showed, we did not get that bigger boost to our frame rate going from DLSS quality to DLSS balanced, right? And the reason for that is DLSS quality is at 67% render resolution scale, so at 4K that is 1440p, and then balanced is somewhere in between. It's like 1253p, I believe. So it's not that big a difference when it comes to actual pixel count, and that's the reason why we don't see that big a difference. So right, 80-ish frames per second. I think this will be pretty good to start enabling frame generation. Even at DLSS balance on the high preset, the game looks very, very good. There is some flickering issues in the background. I saw, see that building over there. Not sure if it's actually upscaling related, but let's go ahead and enable frame generation here, getting around 80-ish frames per second. So we should be able to get around 110 frames per second, I believe. Let's go ahead and apply that. Let's see, refresh our numbers, and 170. So this is actually much better. This is at 4K on the high preset, DLSS balanced, frame generation enabled. I think this is maybe the better way to play it, because we don't have to drop down all the way to DLSS performance to get above 100 frames per second, and the preset scanning actually works quite well in this game. Right, let me restart the save again, and then we'll test DLSS performance, and then we'll drop down to 1440p again. All right, so let's just set DLSS to performance here. No frame generation this time. Let's go ahead and save it, and let's see So now we're getting around 100 frames per second without any frame generation enabled, right? Now, the shadow does remind me a lot of Cyberpunk shadows when it just released. Like, it's a very, very funny looking static shadow. Okay, I mean, it's not completely static. It does actually move a little bit with your gun, but reminds me a lot of Cyberpunk. So between 70 and 100 frames per second, your DLSS performance. And the game, as I said, the game does look plenty good still, but just look at the reflection in the pond there. You can see it's shimmering quite a bit. So the more aggressive upscaling definitely introduces a lot more shimmering in certain aspects of the game. If you were to just run around along this path, I'm just crouching because I'm trying to lose that guy. So just running around this path, looking at the foliage, the buildings, etc. Like, there's really no issue with DLSS performance at all, but it's in the finer detail where it starts to break up a little bit. All right, so as you can see in the shingles of the roof as well, when we move, it does not look ideal. All right, so last test here at 4K, I'm going to just enable not upscaling, DLSS frame generation quickly, see how far we can actually push the frame rate here, and 130-ish frames per second. Actually, pretty good, I'd say, at for 4K output. Not horrible. I mean, sure, we are using 1080p internal resolution, yeah. So it is to be expected to get a pretty decent output. But I was expecting slightly less, considering how the Epic preset testing went. The Epic preset is very heavy. 120-ish frames per second here, perfectly fine. If you are okay with a little bit of like a detail breakup in certain areas. As I said, I'm not the biggest fan of performance at 4K, or DLSS performance at 4K, but we have to test everything, right? So 120-ish frames per second there. I reached 118 actually, but our lows are once again pretty low. So let's go ahead and just enable going back down to 1440p actually. Then we'll test the native on the high preset. I'm just going to talk through the whole Elgato no signal thing. It'll come back just now. So let's go. We're on the high preset and we'll do DLAA with no frame generation enabled here, and see what kind of gains we get. I just need to fix one more thing. Right, so now the overlay is my mouse isn't working. There we go. Okay, so the overlay is resized properly, getting 80-ish frames per second. Yes, it's a pretty nice boost over the Epic preset, and I think it still looks plenty good, right? There is still some breakup, so maybe it's more related to the high preset instead of DLSS, but DLSS definitely exacerbates the shimmering issue a bit. But okay, the shadows, at a distance, the shadow detail is quite low, but the moment you get closer, it looks okay. They look better. Okay, so 80-ish frames per second here on the high preset, and I mean, it is kind of annoying that you do need something like a 4080 Super to be able to play at 1440p native resolution, right, and get above 60-ish frames per second. Sure, you might be able to get away with it on a 4070 Ti Super or 4070 Ti. On the high preset, you'll probably get around 60, I don't know, 65 frames per second as well. There's not that big a difference between a 4080 Super and a 4070 Ti Super, or 4070 Ti for that matter. So you should be able to get 60 frames per second using these settings. But once again, those are also still pretty high-end GPUs and pretty expensive. So let's go ahead and enable DLSS quickly. I don't think I'm going to test much further than this, right? The video is already getting very long, so I'm going to enable DLSS. Yeah, then we'll test frame generation, then we'll just test balanced as well, the same as previously. All right, so 120 frames per second here. Okay, this is very, very good actually. I mean, it feels very responsive. I'm just moving the mouse around quite quickly, but 100 frames per second, and without any frame generation we are getting 100 something frames per second, and input latency feels very, very responsive, so that's pretty good. So 95 frames per second in the more demanding area, 100 and something frames per second in on the road here, and not terrible. I mean, it could be better, obviously. So let's hope for a few patches to improve. All right, so 101 frames per second average there. Now let's just go ahead and enable frame generation quickly. Maybe this is where I'd be playing on the high preset instead of the epic preset. Even though I do have a 4080 Super, it's rough going on the epic preset. Okay, so 150-ish frames per second here. I think this is actually, I think I'd prefer this because we're sitting with DLSS quality and frame generation instead of DLSS balanced and frame generation. So it should be a little bit sharper, and we're getting the same frame rate, right? Except we are obviously running on the high preset instead of the epic preset, but I mean, it is what it is, and that's how it goes. So this is definitely something that I'm personally considering actually after seeing this. Right, so let's just I'm going to leave frame generation enabled. Well, actually, let's not do that. Let's do two separate tests here. Let's disable frame generation, go to DLSS balanced, and apply these settings here, and see. Actually, this is also not horrible. As I said, I'm okay with DLSS balanced at 1440p and at 4K as well. That's about as aggressive as I'm personally willing to go when it comes to upscaling. But 100 and something ish frames per second here, very responsive. But once again, it's really not that different from DLSS quality in terms of performance. Our CPU power is sitting at 150 watt. That's rough. And GPU power is sitting at 218 watts. So definitely not making full use of our GPU. Yeah. All right. Just going to enable frame generation here, and then we'll be done. The video is getting very long, and we haven't even touched on the medium preset. All right, so DLSS balanced, and then just enabling frame generation here, and let's just go ahead and look at our frame rates. So it goes up to 186. It actually did that earlier as well at DLSS quality, but it did not maintain that. Okay, so those are just crows. So 158 frames per second here. Pretty good, actually. The input latency is still perfectly fine, even with frame generation enabled. At this higher frame rate, it's definitely not noticeable to somebody like me, anyway. Some people might notice it, some people might not, but I just know that there is a slight input latency penalty when enabling frame generation, and the higher your frame rate, the less that is actually noticeable. Right, so 160 frames per second average here. Not terrible, showing you DLSS balanced with frame generation enabled. So if you do require a high refresh rate experience, 160 frames per second plus, then these are the settings that you should use. All right, I think that's going to be it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.